Hello and welcome from Santiago, Chile to this episode of Crossing Borders with Nathan Lustig, where I normally have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a focus on those with some connection to Latin America. This episode is brought to you by LatAmList.com. If you like this podcast, you'll enjoy LatAm List's daily tech news reporting. Sign up for the mailing list to get weekly updates. Special thanks, before we get started, to the Collins family who left a very nice review on iTunes. Thanks again for listening. This episode is another special version of Crossing Borders, this time focusing on helping Latin American founders who are in the interview process at YCombinator. YC has been one of the leaders in U.S. investors investing in Latin America and has served as a signal for many U.S. investors to start making their first investments in the region. Starting in 2013, YC accepted its first Latin American founder, but in the last batch there are over 15 companies from Latin America, a really big increase. Some of Latin America's biggest success stories, including Rappi, were YC alumni, and YC continues to be one of the most attractive early-stage accelerators for Latin American founders. This episode features 8 founders who talk about their experience going through YC and their advice to founders who are in the interview process. While this is tailored for LatAm founders, I think it can be helpful for founders from all backgrounds and founders who are applying to any other accelerator. Thanks to the founders who participated and were willing to share their advice. Without further ado, let's get to the founders. First up is Christian Van der Henst, co-founder of Platzi, an e-learning platform in Latin America. Christian has been one of the leaders in Latin America and is always willing to give a helping hand to Latin American founders thinking about trying to raise their first money or get into Y Combinator.
We applied for YC in 2014, were rejected, and then we reapplied in 2015. We were part of the batch of Winter 15. And the most important thing is our batch was really supportive, and we also managed to understand Silicon Valley. I always said that YC, it's like the handbook of how to do businesses in Silicon Valley. They give you a lot of advice and they build a great community of entrepreneurs. They're the main reason why we got our first round of funding. And I would always recommend any entrepreneur in the world to apply to YC. Even if you don't get accepted, just the exercise, it's great to figure out if what you're building is worth it.
What were some of the biggest surprises that you learned when you were in the program?
Uh, I realized that I wasn't thinking big enough. At some point, I would talk to some of the partners about like, I want to build this. And they're like, oh, small company. Why don't you think bigger? So they will always let me know when I wasn't really thinking big. And second, uh, they show me how to ask for stuff. Christian, if you want to do this, just call the guy who knows how to do it and ask if they want to help. You need to sell. So that was also super valuable. I remember at some point, we were learning how to pitch to an investor, and they just got us an amazing investor into the room. And it's like, perfect. You want to learn how to talk to an investor? Here's a very famous investor. Talk to him. And that's it. We learn by doing.
How much of the value of the program while you were in it was the partners versus the other teams that were in the program with you?
The biggest value so far uh, are other entrepreneurs. They are my friends. They are my community. When I do something right, they celebrate with me. When something is in trouble, they will help me out. Some of them help me get some of our most important investors. Some of them have tried the product. I have friends that don't even speak Spanish and they try everything that we do. It's like, Christian, this doesn't work. And this, I don't know if it's what you're trying to do here. I don't understand the Spanish, but you should change this color and whatever. So that community is the biggest thing that we got out of the program.
Next up is Deepak Chhugani, an Ecuadorian entrepreneur who was in the 2018 batch of Y Combinator, sharing his advice on how entrepreneurs should think about going through the interview process.
Hi, Magma Partners. My name is Deepak, founder of Nuvocargo. I went through the YC Winter 18 batch with another idea. We had a big pivot. My advice for the interview is very simple. If you have a business that's launched and has traction, your interview should be about spending the first 2 minutes or 1 minute of the interview explaining them exactly what your company does. And if you don't get that right, the rest of the interview can become a very long and awkward back and forth where they're just trying to understand what you do. And what you should be striving for is that they understand exactly what the company does. So the rest of the interview is about convincing them why it's a good business and why you're going to be a gigantic company. So that's my advice. And then the advice for getting the most out of the program, I think that if you have something that's working and you actually have a lot of faith in, that's the best way to do the program so that you can use it as a catapult to really grow fast and raise capital to take your business to the next level. Some people really like using YC for the mentorship of the partners and to figure out their business. I actually think it's better to wait until something is working and you really feel it can be a large business and then use YC as a catapult. I think that's the most exciting way to use the program. But there's also a lot of benefits to using it just for the mentorship and the resources. And above all, going into the interview or the program, keep your head up. Don't compare yourself too much with others. At the end of the day, all that matters 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years after the program is that you built a good company and that you're enjoying and you're proud of the company you've built. Good luck.
Next up is Emmanuel Oquendo from Brain High. Brain High was the first Puerto Rican company to go to Y Combinator. And Emmanuel's story is incredible about how they were able to continue to build the business even though Puerto Rico was devastated by a hurricane. Check out his entire podcast to hear his backstory, which is 100% worth it. Here's his advice on Y Combinator.
So the process of applying to Y Combinator was very important because it forced us to simplify Brain High into something that everybody could get quickly. And that was something that Y Combinator gave us even during the application process. The other thing that we learned is that through that process of 3 weeks, it's not only about the script and what you're going to say, it's about you and your co-founder really working together on getting more confidence on each other. Since, for example, in my case, I tend to be the one that talks the most. Israel, as the CTO, he's happy just coding. However, in that was there was a very important shift in our preparation, and was a conversation between me and Israel, where I asked him to talk more, and I asked him to participate with me in the interview. And I know that was a very important part of the interview because it really gave light to the relationship that we actually have, which is a 50-50 relationship in this startup.
What other advice would you give to founders for the interview itself?
Yeah, I think that practicing a lot. It's just about practice. And I would say that the other thing is that try to do mock interviews as you can. Find people from your same country. For example, if you're from Mexico, whatever, Colombia, you can find other startups from your country that more than sure will help you because it's a very particular interview. It's a 10-minute interview, which is it goes really fast. So you need to prepare for that interview also. So in addition to practicing, having confidence in your co-founders to talk and look fluid when pitching Brain High, and sorry, not Brain High, but your startup, and simplifying your startup concepts. Those would be the three things that I would recommend.
So now that you got in, what's the best way to take advantage of the program?
Yeah, you need to get a lot of office hours with people. Like I got to talk with everyone in Y Combinator, Michael Seibel, and yeah, they're there. They're not gonna tell you what to do or how to do it. They're gonna answer your questions. So you just need to ask a lot of questions and make sure that you get and make sure that you extract value from it because it's not as structured as for example, parallel team. It's more of a one night at a week meeting, big meeting, and that's it. So you need to make sure that you access the network, you ask questions, and you're in you're focused on the program, you're and on the goals of the program.
Next up is Joao de Paula, the first founder from Latin America to go through Y Combinator all the way back in 2013. What was the interview process like back in 2013? And did Latin America and being operating in Latin America come up in the interview?
Yeah, that came up. So We were doing a product that was quite similar to Yelp. So the obvious question was, why is not Yelp in Latin America? So we always had to answer that question. And we also had some bigger competitors that were doing the product here, but I just don't think that they were doing a very good job at adapting the product to the Latin American ecosystem. So we got into the interview, and I think that the interview process didn't change that much. It's still quite quick, 10-minute interview with some partners. This was still quite early days for YC. This was the last batch before they made the jump to 100 companies. So we were interviewed by Paul Graham, Jessica Livingstone, Trevor Blackwell, and Robert Morris, which are the YC founders. And it was really, really fast. So PG started asking a bunch of questions, what we did, how big was the market, how fast we were growing. Trevor, I think, pulled up his MacBook and started looking at our product, making questions about some of the decisions we made. He started comparing our product to one of our competitors, and that was it. We were out. And I was almost sure that it didn't get in. So we were very, very surprised and extremely happy when they called us a couple hours later, asking us if we were willing to let them invest.
What advice would you give to other founders when either thinking about applying to YC and then once they get to the interview process?
I think that the advice for people that are considering to apply to YC is just apply. Like I said before, it's such a good exercise on company building to be able to take a step back and think about the stage you're in, how fast you're growing, what's the market you're going after, how is the relationship between the co-founders, does the equity split make sense? All of the questions that they ask during the application process are really, really, really good and really thought out. I think they experiment with it every once in a while and add new questions, remove old ones. And I think it's such a precise way of thinking about a business that it's a great exercise for any entrepreneur to take. Oh, and then another tip is just reaching out to YC founders. I probably help a dozen companies every 6 months with their application and with the interview process, and generally coaching them on positioning themselves well for the partners. So I think that that's a very, very good advice. If you make to the interview stage, I think reaching out to YC founders becomes even more important, because doing mock interviews is the best way to learn about the process that is going to take place in those 10 minutes. Also, like, just position yourself as someone who will be successful even if YC doesn't invest generally helps, but that I think is probably a very good general fundraising advice.
And how about once you get into the program, what would be your advice to get the most out of YC or any other accelerator?
Yeah, I think that advice depends on your background, but if we're talking about Latin America, I think most Latin America founders come from a scarcity environment. So we grow up getting used to trading our time for money. So if you have to run an errand, you go do it yourself. If you have to go take a bus instead of Ubering somewhere, you go and take a bus or you walk there. And after you get into YC, you have literally 3 months to put your company in the best position it can get to have a shot at raising money from investors. So you need to get out of this scarcity mindset and put the money that YC invests to work so you can get to demo day in a very, very good spot. So that's the most important advice that I would give to a Latin American founder. The other advice, I think that in the first YC dinner, they always tell you to write code, talk to users, eat, sleep, and exercise. When I did YCombinator, I definitely focused too much on writing code and talking to users, and I didn't sleep, I didn't eat well, I didn't exercise, and it's a marathon. It takes a toll on you. It's very, very intense 3 months, which you have to focus 100% on it. So just taking a step back once a week and taking care of yourself is quite important. And the last feedback that I would have for someone who's in that position is to pick the partner well. So YC has a lot of partners now, and it's really, really important for you to pick one or two with which you have a rapport and that understand your space, understand your company, and people that you can generally have conversation about deep topics and that can track your progress through time.
Next up is Daniel Bilbao, co-founder of Truora, a checker for Latin America. Daniel gives his advice on how to think about applying for YC and the entire interview process. A couple of tips for a company that's thinking about applying to YC or then for the interview.
For the first one, for applying to YC, is just apply. There's a lot of people that negotiate themselves down and say, no, I shouldn't. Most YC startups have no traction. They barely have a team. And in Latin America, there's this view because Rappi went in and it had a bunch of traction, and then Ogado and a couple of others had traction, that you need to be a well-built business to go to YC. That's not the case. So if you're a smart team, just apply. And you can always reapply. There's no issue. So that's the first recommendation. The second one is be very thoughtful about that application process and hopefully ask former founders or VCs or angels, people you know, to take a look at it. Because there's a very clear thing of what they're looking for as a whether you're fundable or not. But it's mostly very good team, decent TAM, and if you have some traction, that it makes sense. Or at least that's my view. Try to talk to other folks who've gone through the process. Like there's no shame in like learning from other people's experiences. So that would be my top recommendation.
And for the interview?
For the interview, so it's super quick. It's 10 to 15 minutes. I forget if it's 10 or 15, but it's rapid fire. There's an IPV website where you can just get the questions that they're going to ask you, and you're supposed to answer them in 15 seconds. Us Latin Americans tend to speak in in stories, like in Cien Años de Soledad. Like this is the complete opposite. So what's your revenue? 40K. What's your revenue? Well, we started working at 40K, and then tell the story. Like first the fact and then the story, and be very crisp on that. So that's my biggest recommendation. Like no BS.
And once you get in, what's the best way to take advantage of it?
Depends on your business. Our business was in South America, so it was a little bit tricky. But so the best, talk very closely with your partners. Focus on what's important. Try to avoid as many distractions as possible because you're going to be there for 3 months and then everyone's gone. And try to do as your partners tell you. There's some things where you can skew away a little bit, but in general, they really understand what's happening. Like this time around, every time YC would tell me, don't do this, I'm like, no, I'm going to do it anyway. I would regret it like 2 weeks later.
Next up is Freddy Vega, co-founder of Platzi. You heard from Christian before, and Freddy's going to give his advice on the best tips for the interview.
You should have an extremely clear understanding of your metrics. If you are a marketplace, you should understand your gross merchandise volume and what are your margins. If you're a subscription, you should understand your monthly recurring revenue and of course your unit economics, lifetime value, customer acquisition costs, etc. YCombinator is better than most investors regarding investment in Latin America and other emerging markets. However, keep in mind that the difference between founders from the US and founders from emerging markets like LatAm is that they can raise on dreams, big dreams. We cannot. We only raise on metrics and traction. Therefore, we have to do our best to demonstrate excellent skills in terms of discipline with money, understanding on the market. In general, even if they don't ask, you should use every chance to surprise the partners with the unique knowledge that you have on your market. At the end of the day, it should be you who knows better than anybody else about your company, your market, and the kind of mission that you're trying to accomplish. And yeah, on that last part, have a mission. You should have a big mission that you want to accomplish. Not only for YCombinator, but for yourself. Otherwise, why are you doing this at all? Oh, and one last thing. If you're not doing this full-time, 100%, they will not accept you into YCombinator. You need to be doing this full-time. You and your co-founders, full-time.
Next up is Marta Forero, co-founder of Ubits. Check out episode 74 to learn about how she's driving economic growth in Latin America via corporate education. What were some specific tips you would give to other people who are going to have to go through a Y Combinator interview?
First, you need to prepare like a lot. We prepare a lot. We got like 2 hours from each day, from 2 weeks, answering the questions with Julian, understanding the questions. Second, you have to prepare all of the financial terms in English and all of the startup terms in English. It sounds stupid, but for example, for us, it's not usual to say churn or some terms like ARR, MRR, and these are terms from the US. So you have to be like aware of this. You have to you have to know a lot about your company, your numbers, but you have not, like, you cannot get there afraid because of them. There are some companies that write me to help them to make the mockups, and they are always, oh my god, we don't have any revenue, we are not going to pass. Like some of my friends from there, they didn't have any revenue. Their company was like 1 month ago based in the US, and they just passed YC because they had a great idea, and that was it. I believe they invest in the people. So you have to work a lot in your English. If you are a Latin American person, you have to work a lot on what's the image you want to reflect on them, and not talk a lot. We are always, and I'm one of them, in which they make you a question and you answer like for 2 minutes. And they told us like you only have to answer for 15 seconds. And for Latins, that's a huge trouble. So you have to concrete all of your answers. And when you concrete all of your answers, if you have them grabbed, you can also like answer two more questions because you only have like 15 minutes. So you have to give them all the information of your company they want, but all of they want is you and all of the metrics.
How did you practice getting everything into 15-second responses? Because you're right, that is one of the biggest things that we have to basically teach our portfolio company entrepreneurs as well, is like, how do you respond to a question really directly? How do you train for that?
We have a Google Drive in which has all of the questions they were going, like the typical Y Combinator interview questions. So, for example, how does your product work in more detail? Why are you, like, the most difficult question is, why are you going to be a 1 billion company? And that's a question that is not in the Paul Graham mockup. But we first answer all of the questions in a Google Drive. Like all of the questions of the interview, we answer it with Julian in the Google Drive. Then we pass all of the questions of the Paul Graham mockup into that Google Drive, and we start like just measuring the time, and then we practice with the mockup of Paul, and then we call all of the XYZ alumni we can to make us a mockup.
When you were in the program, what advice would you give to somebody to get the best out of Y Combinator once you're already in it?
First, going to all of the meetings. You have to go to all of the meetings. Second, be prepared to have different kind of advices from YC. For example, we are issued to have advisors that tell you what to do here in Colombia or in other countries. In there, they don't tell you what to do. They help you to answer like your problems, and you have to grab all of your problems because they can help you a lot, and grab like all of the sessions you can, because sometimes you don't make it. Second, make all of the friends you can, because that are real friends that can help you, and that are friends that are from all places from around the world that are having the same issues you have. And right now, for example, I have some friends in which I can chat them and ask them for questions. For example, what softwares are you using for these? How are you managing your people? What are you doing? So they are having the same issues, and they can help you a lot. It's a great network, so it's really great. And I believe it's just, there's another advice. It's better living in Mountain View, for example, not in San Francisco, because in Mountain View you can really focus on what you are doing. We were just with the doors closed in our home. We were just working. I believe it's a lot of productivity inside there, and you start working and learning about them. So it's great living in Mountain View, and just going to all of the meetings, meeting people, talking to people, asking them a lot of things, and going to all of the training sessions you have.
Next up is Pedro Goes, the Brazilian co-founder of Inevent.
Hi, it's Pedro from Inevent. My advice if you're applying for YC Winter, it's understand the 3 points that it's great about your company, about your idea that you want to come to share this on the interview. You can either have two options. The first one is from the most common questions that the partners can ask you. Is there a way for you to answer them with one of the points that you want to put out? If that's a possibility, you should be sure about this. Or if you really want to share something in the end, make sure that you share this with the partners within the 10 minutes mark. Like for InEvent was a revenue, the customers that we have been working with, and our traction so far. So, but it can be other things. Like if you don't have a lot of revenue, you can share, for instance, what's really good about your knowledge about the market or your background specifically. But just make sure that you know the 3 points that really are the differentiated offering about what you do, and make sure that the partners know this in the end, that during the 10 minutes of the interview, you've shared the 3 points very clearly with the partners. I think that was the best advice that I got when we applied for the interview last summer.